All right, so very quickly, I'm going to, for the sake of time, accelerate the or side of the intros, and I'm going to say it simply, reach out to me or Taras during the networking period if you want to know what we're doing with Desplega. If you haven't checked it, we have an open source repo, that's the Agent Swarm, and right now we're working intensively on that, and we're happy to talk with your companies or with you about how you can incorporate this technology. It's free, it's open source, all the goodies. Having said that, I'm very, very glad to have these three people here today. So also in the sake of time, I'm going to introduce them, but before I do all that, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate that you're here. I think the three of you right now are going through different moments in your career, but the three of you have an extensive experience in different places. I think this conversation is going to be interesting because Antonio is creating an AI native company from scratch. Felipe is working with the technology from the inception of different companies and tinkering around after coming from leading large organizations. And Miguel has a different kind of headache leading a large organization through this transformation. So we're going to be chatting about AI native. What does it mean? What are we worried about? And my first question for the three of them is, what is the stuff your nightmares are made of right now in the world of AI native? And from my previous chat, I think I have some ideas of where this is going to go. So who wants to start first?
I start? Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone for having us here today. I would say, and as a startup, that we started building 1 year ago, and we grew very fast over this year, make it to 23 employees, serving clients in 20 countries. For me, what's really in my nightmares is, are we going fast enough? Are we really catching up with everything that's coming in AI? Are we not staying behind because we're stuck with something that works for us, and then eventually will let something else interesting pass? No, and it's very difficult to keep up the pace with everything that's being developed. No, and also looking at where should I put my attention on? No, and there are so many things you want to try out, new things that are released every single day, basically. No, and you have to take decisions on, okay, I will spend time on looking at this, and maybe not spend time on looking at that, right? And I think that's my main concern right now. Like, are we missing something, or are we really leveraging everything that's coming, no? and really taking advantage of it, no? and not being left behind? Are we fast enough?
So you don't want to be left behind.
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah.
I can go. Hi, thank you to be here. So my nightmare, it's probably around security. Given the weeks that we have been going through, and yesterday, for example, was a big day, and all the news. Essentially, I'm working now. I'm been tinkering for almost a couple of years with AI, and some months ago decided that I wanted to put something complex in production from scratch, because I think that's the place where you can really build the taste and get the feeling and see the constraints on how to make things happen, because doing a proof of concept or building something quick is easy. So I have a lot of experience in financial services and fintech. So one founder called me that they wanted to start a project. So I singing up to do that, and I've been working. We assembled a really small team, only 3 people, and we started building the MVP. And we are about to be, we closed the first MVP, and we are ready to put that in production. And so this week we are doing the pen test and making sure everything is good. And I feel a little bit the anxiety on, I know we have done it all bioengineering, like following the practices and everything, but at the end of the day, it's like really something really that is going to move a lot of money, and I'm a little bit like extra careful given the time.
I love how humble you are. I remember the first time I learned about AI SDLC was from a repo that I landed from you, that you had created before the human layer and superpowers repos took over the world. So I think you've been tinkering for a while in the right direction way before it happens, right? Please, guys, Antonio, Miguel, not the time to be humble right now. No, I have one question. You said yesterday was a big day for security. Why?
Oh, because of the massive attack, like all the package that were infected with this malware and everything. So we have known for many months like that was a possibility, and we were hoping like that wouldn't happen. But it's really easy to have issues in local development production because essentially the malware was designed to steal tokens and all the access. So yeah, it's a day like it's gonna prove if you are doing things right, isolating correctly the sandboxes, like and managing the cooldowns and those things, and you never can be sure because the spread of the infection was really big.
Are you using any like repos or any technology that's already made for you to do like the security checks, or you're doing everything from scratch?
As everything in security, we are doing layers of things. Essentially, we have been using the models, vanilla models, to test GPT-5, Opus, and put them together against each other, also to validate each other's finding. And also, we use the Vercel tool that they just released, the DeepSec to go through, and also we are doing a third-party pen test, also Agentic. So we got that's currently going. So we'll see what's the result after that.
Everything is fine.
Hopefully.
I have a question regarding this, especially working with financial institutions. What's your view, and this is a general question, like what's your view on like the open models that right now that you can self-host, hence you can like enforce on your infrastructure level that you own the data and not like trust that whatever big provider you're using and they like have the zero data retention and all that for sure. Like, how do you see that going? Is this something that you consider? Have you tried? If you have tried, are the open models at the level that you actually need to push something to production? Because that's the question, and that's something that a lot of people right now are saying, like, okay, they maybe are at the level of the model like 6 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever. I think that's an interesting point of view, especially for those cases, no?
In this one, we are still early. We don't have customers, so we don't have PII data to worry about. But in the company I was before, they were testing a lot of the local models to do a scrubbing of PII because you cannot put the customer data. If typically those controls are going to be built already. Like typically developers are not going to have direct access to that kind of data. You have anonymization and these kind of things. So to me, it's not a big issue if you have contractually your IP well covered and things like that. There is another level of controls, but obviously the local models, I think they are here to stay. I've been doing some tests locally with my developer machine using Quen and things like that, and it's starting to be a reality. Like you can start to use those for your day-to-day stuff, not just to rely on third parties. And I think it's a good thing that we start to get in that direction.
Miguel, what's your nightmare?
Okay, I have many nightmares, but I will name 3 that really make my bed wet in the night. One will be that either Anthropic or any other providers one day will plug the thing. This week we had an issue with our credit card with the procurement, and in like 3 hours we didn't have Anthropic Cloud Code. I received more messages on my Slack that on my birthday. It was crazy. Like, hey, this is not working. I don't know what to do. How I type again. So that's something that really worries me.
You need to read this book.
Then the second one is the call from procurement the other way around. Like, I'm not calling them because the credit card is not working. It's because we have reached our limit or it's going skyrocketing, because then they increase the prices, or they say, okay, the new model is going to consume 3 times more token, and we're going to deprecate the previous one in 6 months now. So you are now in a position that you are becoming kind of useless if you don't have AI. You don't feel like anymore you have the power. I used to travel a lot, and I used the time of traveling. I used to code a lot during traveling. Nobody was worrying me coding, and I don't do that anymore because I don't have connection. So it's like, it's pointless. I will do that when I arrive at the destination, and I will give all the prompts all together. So that is another one. And the third one, that is the one I can control mostly, and is related to the previous one you said, is not having everyone on the latest and using all the tools, at least that now the two previous one are controlled, and taking advantage of that. Because now everything that any company like Flywire has been building for many, many years, more than a decade, could be built, not in a weekend, but you could get something very close to that very quickly. So we need to move as quickly as that, but we are way bigger than anybody else that is starting. So that will be my 3 fears. I'm starting to shake a little bit. So I'll stop.
Actually, for the first 2 fears, how are you thinking about addressing them? What are you starting to think about doing there to like mitigate those?
Yeah, good question. He mentioned that before. So we are starting to plan our strategy of how we self-host that. So I think that any company that's going to consume heavily on LLMs should have a strategy of how it's going to have a flat cost on tokens, and then you will have on demand. And depending on your workload, you will rely on something that you know how much it's going to pay, and then you will rely on something more powerful if you need that. And the models are getting very good nowadays. Something that is something we could assume without going to very, very low quality. So we are laying down our strategy. So far, it's just a bunch of PowerPoints, but I'm pretty sure that this year, 2026, is going to be a hot topic in general on big companies that is going to be a need.
So basically, you're going to have your own data center in a certain way, right? Like your whole.
I expect to rent it, but yeah.
Yeah, but you're going to have your own physical machines running this. They're going to be for your company. That's interesting. And then you're going to have the local SLMs of your choosing running there, or small LLMs running there. How are you thinking about the software running and all the complexities that come with having those kind of setups where you need to do hot swaps within, I don't know, Pi, Mono, and open code, right? Or maybe change harnesses, or like how are you thinking about the software layer on top of that?
But what do you mean on the software engineering?
I imagine, like what I was thinking is if you start having these models running for you, then you probably want to tune how your agents use those models according to your business case. That was my jump. Maybe that's not the case right now. You're thinking I'm going to use it with Cloud Code, right? Like, and behind the scenes, I'm just using that.
So something we didn't lay down. I look into it from the financial part.
Okay.
Okay, this is not going to be sustainable in the long term. When I was doing the business plan of 2026 on my company, and I was okay, on tokens we're going to spend this amount of money. Yeah. Before we end the first quarter of this year, we already consume the whole year budget. So okay, it's not going to be, okay, multiply by 4 and you have the whole year covered. It's not going to be like that because it's growing. Not exponentially, but in a very trendy way. So it's more on that side. How we're going to connect those data center or execution that we have into our workflows is something we have today to discover.
And one last question, and this is giving you all a sneak peek on the questions that are coming, right? But we've been always talking here about the worst case nightmares from a tech perspective. But we have solutions in Code, well, in OpenAI, in Anthropic, right? Like they started releasing these managed agent solutions, right? That add complexity to all of this because now you're going to have the same problem that you are having in tech, in finance, right? They just launched the finance solution and the legal solution. So are you guys talking cross-functionally? Well, mostly you are the one that has the biggest counterparts on the other side, right? Like, do you see this being a challenge that you also need to address for sales, marketing, and operations, right?
Yes, definitely. So from the technical point of view, within Fiverr, is in our duty to solve this for the whole company. I see the Gen AI as internet, so at some point it's going to be on everyone day to day. But until then, we should be the enablers of other parts of the system in a safe way. This is really important, so nobody do crazy things. So there is a lot of, it's the time that we need to enable them. So we have those roles of AA enablement within the company to give the productivity that they can gain with this and also teach them to use the new tooling that we have.
So you're building internal tooling so they can actually build the agents in your own infra or something like that?
Not like that, mostly using what is off the shelf.
Okay.
And then now we're getting in the moment of going to creating sort of most like skills and something that they do, doing in a better way. We're creating internal MCPs, that kind of thing that can, within our company, stay on the latest technology without building anything new. so far.
On the other side of this, and for the ones of you that have like teams with non-technical counterparts, let's say, how do you handle the situations where, or I assume that you have situations where non-technical people is starting or attempting to contribute to the technical side, and I would like to know like what's your view on that, because that's a kind of like a hot topic, because I saw people saying like two different ranges, and there are reasons for each, but like I'm curious, what do you think about that? Because that's similar to what you were mentioning, but more like how they come to you to where they didn't come before because they couldn't.
Yeah, here, for example, we had a bit of this concern with, let's say, product UX, UI, and thinking about, okay, we don't want to be building Figmas and then translating that to code, etc. No, and we would like to ideally go directly into building something. And here, for example, what we do currently is someone from product or, let's say, product UX can build directly in frontend in a branch, and they would build any functionality, interaction, whatever they would like to ship or ideate, and then they work together with an engineer to make that a reality, no? And then both work on polishing the feature, etc., and looking at what's needed from the backend side, etc. No, and this has been working very well for us because we get these profiles that are more like product UX oriented to build something and show it to the rest of the team, and also getting engineers to come up with much better solutions, especially on the front end side and on the conversational experience, etc. No, we have like both UI that you interact with, but also the UIs that are managed with voice agents, etc. No, and we see that more and more, and it's working pretty well for us. Then we have also sales and other parts of the company using AI more and more. We are using Cloudwork, but at the same time, I see ideally I wouldn't want to stick with one provider or having a solution that doesn't allow me to move. If then I see there's something else that performs better, no? And I think the problem will be a bit the lock-in. Once you see something works, etc., you start throwing all your data there and get your workflows integrated, etc., and then you see you cannot move to something else. At the end, Anthropic, for any reason, is not leading anymore, and then OpenAI is doing that or whatever, no? And then you are already fully invested into something and need to change.
Yeah, I see here like a clear, like going back to the NPM hack, you know, like I don't know, like the Cloud Cowork sandbox, what packages has installed, right? Like, and I think like going that this pattern of going or using open source right now is like more and more relevant than ever, because like in the world where everything is going so fast, you need to have a way to control and see what's inside the box, and I think open source is really valuable, right? On one end, because generally it's easier to kind of like not get the locked in, and in the other end, because you can see and okay, this new version has the new version that is hacked. I won't upgrade, but Cloud Cowork maybe automatically updates, God knows, you know, like I see it. Just as a side note, because I think this
Totally.
is also an interesting conversation about open source.
Also from the cost side, as Miguel said, no, like from the cost point of view, I think now everyone has been playing a lot with the models, spending. Maybe there has been more freedom also on budgets, etc., to explore and build, and people were not so restricted from the budgeting side. But I think it will become more and more of an issue, and companies will take these strategies where they say, okay, we host our own models, or give us this flexibility, and at the same time we have more control. Of course, we have to then manage all the tooling around it, etc.
Actually, one thing that sorry,
I was about to ask.
Go.
On the open source, no? Like how do you envision the open source going forward? In the sense like this velocity, this openness, open like new thread or new ways of things that we weren't ready. Like GitHub is struggling to catch up with the pace. We are trying to go really fast, and that's opening really difficult problems to solve, like maintainers saying that they are not going to get PRs or integrate PRs, new policies. It's everybody's scrambling around trying to figure like what's your view on that moving forward.
Can you hear me well? Just to confirm this. No, it's fine. If you can hear me, then. So this is an interesting question because like I definitely see the open source being completely different before and after AI. So that's fair. Like, again, like, my point about GitHub is like, okay, we are all complaining, but at the same time, like, they are handling a ton of like slop to a level that they couldn't even like buy the machines in time, no? And I can see that. But the problem is that the problem with this is that how do you know what's slop, what's not, in what to invest, no? And I think coming back to the first ever fear of this conversation is like, how do you kind of like have a method to kind of like iterate on what you're trying, stick to something or not? So I think like investing in that, and I don't have an answer on that because we ourselves, we are spending a lot of time of that, and so that we are like trying a lot of things, but at the same time it's like we cannot try everything. So it's like, then I guess like there's a point of like, I don't know, I want to say like reputation to some extent, you know, like some specific people or teams or companies that say, okay, we're going to invest on that. I think, for example, Vercel is investing a ton on this. Like they are shipping open source tools all the time. And that kind of like builds a brand for them, but at the same time, like it builds the confidence of like, okay, this big company is investing a ton, it's investing teams on building these tools and a lot of eyes in there. So maybe like these type of tools, I guess, like I would see more companies that didn't went into open source going into open source now, and maybe pushing for those packages and those products to be more adopted. No, like maybe that's my point. I think Bertel is an example, but there are more of them. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's an interesting thing to see externally, definitely.
Right. I think there's one more thing, right? Like there's somewhat or something I've been noticing. There's something that resembles this fast fashion idea, where you see these repos that suddenly get 1 trillion stars in 15 minutes, and then they are not maintained anymore, right? And like through 3 weeks later, it was basically a nice sized project, and that's it. So I see something happening like that. But the counterpart is something that I heard saying about Cloud Code specifically, but I experienced myself when using some repos, which is open source has a very nice thing, which is you can fix it. And with these harnesses, it's easy to fix certain bugs, right? And if you are using closed software, traditionally, you cannot fix it really. So I think there's something to say about that. If code is going to be free, in quotes, many quotes, right? Open source is the only way to make sure that we collaborate in something that's reliable and you have the control. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm a kid from the 90s, and I grew up seeing all these hackers and communities and like, you know, all this sharing and building together. So I'm very excited about that. But I definitely am noticing that if I need to use a library and the library is open source and it's not an API service, then I can fix the bugs immediately. And that's a massive win, right? And I never understand the code.
And just a final note on this, like probably, I don't know how many of you like had to go through like a formal review process to fork an open source project in a company, but I would imagine that's the general case. Right now, the price that you pay for forking and maintaining something is much less to some extent. So like going in that direction, just forking something right now is much cheaper than before, and it's much more reasonable, I guess.
In general, I have the feeling like we are in this transitionary stage where the old ways of doing things and some laws of physics are broken, and we are trying to discover them as we go, and some system and some ways were designed to an old way, like it's moving into something else. So there are new systems, new techniques that needs to be rediscovered and built, and it's going to take some years, but we are in this interim stage that is weird in general.
Just to add on what you just said, Taras and Felipe, I think Well, for example, something I'm not doing in the past that I'm doing now is there were many observability tools that we were using where we were using external tools and just paying for them because it's not part of your core business, etc. And then you don't want to spend so much effort maintaining that, evolving that software, etc. And you just prefer to pay, get the new features that the vendor releases, etc. No? And what I found now with AI is like, okay, now the cost to maintain something is much lower, and then you see, well, if I get to the point where the tool doesn't provide me with all those additional features that I might want to consume, etc., then I build my own tool. No? And we've done it many times now with different, especially like agent observability and some other tools, especially because also the providers that are out there are not that mature as well. So many times we reach the point where we say, okay, we're maxing out on what they can provide us, and we would like to build this, this, and this, and maybe we can just build ourselves. No? And that's what we have done with several platforms. And it's the approach we're following now. Okay, we start with a provider for something that is not core to us. Eventually, if we want to go further, we build it ourselves. Because now the cost to maintain it is so much lower, no? And I think I see this trend more and more, and we've seen it also with those news about, I don't know, someone killing his Salesforce and building something in-house because they were spending 10 million a year in Salesforce, no? So I think this will be a trend that will be, well, of course, you have to be careful. Probably building a Salesforce from scratch might not be relatively a good idea, but still, I think this trend will be happening, will be increasing.
Actually, I'm super interested on hearing, Miguel, how you see the build versus buy challenge in a large organization, because it's a little different, right? So I would love to hear that.
Rebuilding Salesforce from scratch, I've heard it many times. And if I get to build more, okay, why wouldn't I build more of the features that only my product has instead of building on something can still provide? So for me, the build versus buy still applies, but you reduce the cost on both. So you reduce the cost of doing an extra feature that you wouldn't do because this doesn't have a good ROI. And also you have the one on buying something. So I still would prefer to pay for something that is not my core business and go the extra mile. And something very important that normally we all are aware probably in this room, but not the other people in the business, is that building is one thing, but maintaining is another one. You still have to self-host. You will need requests from within your company. Hey, can you add something to this feature, to this product that you help build now? You have with Salesforce or any other vendor a team doing that, and now faster. So you're getting updates and new things for free, not for free, paying for that, but you're paying for that already. You will create the need within the company. So if I imagine building everything we have from third parties within Fiverr, even if it's cheap to do it, I don't want to maintain it. I don't want to have requests within the teams. Say, can you add this functionality to something that is not our core business instead of doing something for the users? So we'll look to that. Being said that, we have rewritten some very, very expensive tooling that didn't have a really value added. So we say, okay, we are relying on this provider for something that is not core business, but help us a lot. And now the build versus buy, blend a little bit into building. But those were at the edge already. So it's now a little bit more to make it our core functionality. But in the 95% of the functionalities, doesn't make sense.
Any way you can give us kind of an example of what are you talking about? Otherwise, I can give my own type of example and see if it matches. But if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear an example on that.
Yeah, you're recording this meeting, so
I can answer then. No, I think like some providers completely disappear, right? Like, or completely disappear, no, or they are having a hard time, right? Data labeling is one of those spaces that if you are okay with 90%, right, accuracy nowadays, and you don't need 99% accuracy, then you're like, you know what? Like the models off the shelf, probably without any training, without any sophistication, they are just going to give me the answer that I want, right? And we've seen a lot of companies struggling with that. Their whole model was, we're going to be always one step ahead. And maybe they still are, but the market doesn't need that step ahead, right? So yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. And anyway, I can give some examples. I don't know if you know Fivetran, the tool that allow us to pull from data and put into our data warehouse. So that's a way that normally you pay for rows you're ingesting. So there the build versus buy, or the ingest, pay versus building your own pipelines. It's okay. How important is this data for me? How much time I have to invest into that? So we have moved some of the connector we have with Fivetran, very expensive one because the number of rows, changes, etc., into our own ETLs, because in that case it's cheaper to do it in-house, and it's part of something we need. We need that data to work. So we will evolve it. So it's the kind of scenario that the balance was really tight, and we said, okay, now is the time to put it here. And 3 years ago, it wasn't the moment, because the time we will need to invest to put that ETL within our ecosystem was expensive in time, resources, etc.
Okay, and another follow-up question. I love that we're going completely off script. I had some questions prepared. This is not what I had prepared. So actually, when you talked about the buy versus build, right, you were like, now I have an external team, the Salesforce team, right, that is answering the requests from my sales team on the side and improving the system and doing whatever they want to do, right? And maybe they have some RevOps people. Are you starting to see those SaaS more than as a SaaS, as either an advisor or consultant kind of firm, right? Like they are bringing the knowledge on how they operate to your company, and that's actually what you're paying for more than the software that maybe you could build for less, right? Or is it just they focus for the organization? I have focus in the organization to do this, and that's it. I can answer it myself too.
Here I would say, I think companies are expecting more and more of the full service. And now for services companies, there's a huge opportunity to build their own AI stack, etc., and provide the full service that is very tailored for each client, where you own the technology but provide the service. And I think we're seeing that more and more also with large enterprises, because first they want to do AI. They're told by their owners, they're told by their stakeholders, to their investors, not to build AI, have an AI strategy, etc. But they need a lot of hand-holding, and they prefer to go with someone that knows about AI, will help them get there, have all the efficiencies, but also get them there with security, compliance, all of that. No, because you have a super huge enterprise, and then you can build something really nice for a demo, but eventually you want to deploy that agent in production globally in many countries, etc., following the compliance locally in every region, and it becomes much more complex. No. So they need a lot of hand-holding, and this is a very nice opportunity for services companies to step in and use AI to provide them the service, the full service, and build their own tech stack internally to do so. And that's what we're doing as well. No, we have this forward deploy engineer model that now everyone is doing after Palantir. No, but we see more and more companies not only buying the platform, but more of consuming your services to customize it to their needs, tailor it, etc. And also with AI, you can tailor it further. No, so I think before it was a bit of platform versus services, no? And you wanted to sell licenses, you didn't want to customize, you didn't want to do anything of that, and you would like to be the platform company and have someone else do the services. But I mean, from my point of view, no, as selling a platform, but I see more and more now the model of selling the platform plus customizing for the client, going further, and also selling software based on outcomes. And not so much on, I say you this license that costs so much for the software that you're using, but also the pricing model is changing, no? Because if you are charging per seat, but now less people can do the same thing with AI, you're charging for less seats, no? So and you're doing much more work than before. You get more things done, no? So eventually the pricing model has also to change, and you get to provide much more tailored services to your clients. and you don't sell a platform anymore. You're selling the full service and the impact on the KPIs. And that's where you can charge the client. You say, hey, I'm producing this outcome to you. I charge you based on outcome. And I think there have been some articles around that, no, and being published. And I think that's the way to go. Even the pricing model has to change. It's not so much as simple as a software license anymore.
Okay, actually, it's good that you have the mic. We had several conversations during the past few months about how you were adapting, and you were describing a bit of how you created this tech team. I would love to hear what changed in the last year from the ideas that you had at the beginning on how the tech organization should be as it is nowadays, right? And I remember we spent a couple of hours with your team, and I didn't realize that a UX person was actually a UX person, because they were there the whole workshop, they were trying all the things, they were like working with the agent swarm, and then I had the chance to talk with them, and they told me, oh yes, I created my agent to follow the UX principles, and I'm doing all this, right? I'm sending the PR, and I'm in charge of the design system. So definitely there's a shift there. So I would love to hear how you started. What was that idea when you started in Orbio? And how you're seeing it changing, right? And where does it go for you?
Okay, yeah. So initially we had more of a traditional idea, no, like we were using AI to help us go faster and develop faster, develop the UI. We were using it. We were by coding the full front end basically, and focusing more on the dedicating more time to the back end, etc. And I think over time we've seen it. Okay, it's more about doing that research and polishing before shipping anything, no? Because now what is building is being commoditized. So in the end, anyone can build a lot of features very fast, and I think softwares will have many features. Like we will build Frankensteins of softwares that we just ship more and more features, and eventually we get to a point where the software is very complex to use, or like you will find many people leaving some platforms because they say I don't understand this platform, I cannot use it, it's not something I can configure easily, etc. No, so I think the companies that will perform well are the ones that do this research work, etc., and they decide what to build and in which way to build it, because we will find AI slop everywhere with software that just ship platforms that just ship features like crazy, but then eventually it's not a coherent solution that really solves your problems, easy to use, easy to configure, etc. No, so I think that's where that was a bit of the click we did also on our heads, and we think also the defensibility comes from there, no, and also being integrated into the client's workflows, and also making the platform more something we've also learned over time is if anyone can build such a platform in 2 weeks, then where the Celtic facility comes from, no, and not only because we get integrated into the workflows of the client, etc., but also if we build learning loops and we move from AI at the operational layer, but also more on a tactical or even a strategic level, we can differentiate from other softwares, no? And basically, if you use the platform, you can get the platform to learn from not only the context that's written, but also how the platform is being used, and you can infer a lot of things from just purely from usage, and then you can tailor the platform more and bring more value to the client, no? So eventually the client will say, hey, I see now another software that looks like this, but it will not provide me as much value as this one, because this platform learns from my usage and keeps improving itself, no? And I think we see that compounding effect where the more you use the platform, the more value you can provide to the client, because the more data is there, and the more we can infer from that, no? And I think that's a very big differentiation from just software that are tools that you can copy very easily, and where you don't really have such a defensibility, no?
I have a quick question, I think for you, and then we go back to this one. But it's like I was talking with a founder like a few hours ago, and we were talking about especially this, like how some software solutions right now are changing from, I I mean, historically, you would just buy something and you would have the full feature set of features that that platform gives you from the start. You might have like some like that get enabled based on like progress in the app, but like it was to some extent deterministic, let's say, even though like might not completely be, but like let's say it's deterministic. Now there's this, I think, emerging pattern of software, and when I say software is because it also implies on how you build it, not like how do you use it, but how you build it, in which you start to think how your software will evolve with the use of someone and what are the kind of like functionalities that might appear with use, no? Like for example, going back to our agent swarm, it's like initially it might be like hard to use or not clear because it hasn't really still learned how do you work, but as you give an opportunity and use it more and more, every time you see it as like much better and much more aligned on how do you want to use it, what you want to do, and so on. And I can see this emerging in other like product areas and so on. So I think this is more for all of you on how do you see kind of like maybe this product reasoning or how do you build software more of like AI native from the start. Like I think these are an interesting question, especially on that.
Yeah, here especially with enterprise clients, you have to navigate this hybrid mode where there are certain things where you would like to really benefit from not being so deterministic, right, and have a more of a flexible approach. No, like for example, we have an agent that talks to HR, no, and then that agent can learn whether you are a very senior HR VP or a junior one based on the questions that you ask, etc. No, and it can tailor how it behaves with you and whether it goes more direct and just with bullet points, etc., or it gives you more reasoned explanations, etc., because you request those, no, and there you can tailor the behavior of the agent, etc. But then there are certain things that the agent might need always to ask you because of compliance, no, like you would say. I cannot reject someone from a hiring process automatically. I always need to ask, no? So, but for example, as an agent, I could reach out to the candidate automatically without you needing to confirm every time I'm gonna reach out to the candidate, no? For example, so we see both agents adapting the behavior and at the same time maintaining very strict control for certain actions that would always need some kind of human in the loop, etc., especially on regulation, compliance, auditing, all of that.
It's a little bit that game, no? Like how do you onboard and how do you engage the customer? And then I think we are not in the iteration that is going to stay. I feel like voice is going to be a big medium that we are going to be interacting with the software going forward. The models are coming up and improving really quickly. And I think there are going to be like experiences that are much more tailored to who you are and have like a conversation, and we're still missing interfaces, but I think they are going to be coming up really quickly.
Okay, actually, we had many interesting conversations here. One thing that I'm asking myself, and we don't have that much time, also if people have questions, please raise your hands. There's a question there at the back.
So I have listened to the analogy many times of comparing, many of you have, of the assembly and then going up to what we do today, PHP, Python, Java, whatever. to now going one level of abstraction more and then writing. And there is a big jump there. I write Python, and I know that the same Python is going to execute exactly the same every time. I write a prompt, and depending on the model I have under it, is different behavior. And that level is not abstraction, is undeterministic. So I don't think that we can change the way we do. I mean, we change the way we do software development, but I don't think we can just go one level of abstraction and stay there. You have to go to look to the code and come back. At least as I see that, because I don't think we can prompt it all in doing professional software development. So I don't see I see the analogy, but I don't see that as a real comparison of how what is happening on this step up. And if it were the case, indeed, if that were the case, everything that is in between assembly, right in there, the lowest level, and the plain English will disappear, because there is no sense for me to do a prompt and write Python if I can do C, if I can do lower and lower and lower. So that will be binary directly at the end of the day. I don't think we will be in the ever there as long as it's undeterministic. It's my take.
I have a different one. Slightly. So I'm being quite hype about the work from Chad Fowler. I don't know if you know, he's an early Ruby guy, and he's been publishing a blog post disserting about a potential future architecture. He's calling it Phoenix architecture. And essentially what he's saying is, seeing the current trajectory of the LLMs generating more easily code, and also understanding and more correct code every time that we are able to validate more easily. He sees like a future where we have like essentially like an spec that is with all the business logics on invariance on the system, defining thoroughly all the testing constraints and all the stuff, that being the master of record, and essentially having the LLMs regenerate parts of the code automatically instead of refactoring, directly rebuilding different parts with different layers that move in a different pace. And there are a lot of tools that we don't have, and even like languages that automatically have validation built in and formal validation and things like that. But I feel that's a likely direction when the cost and the velocity of building all the LLMs really come up. But I mean, that's before like what you were saying, like essentially the LLM runs the whole thing directly from the prompt. I think there is an intermediary step where we are going to be more effective. Same thing that we did with the servers. Like we used to manage like pets, like configure them like thoroughly and put the names. Now there are like essentially cattle, like where we just redeploy automatically infra's code and things like that. So something like that might be an intermediary step before getting into the LLMs generating the thing. I don't know. It's not possible today. I've been doing some tests and building some proof of concept with more or less and regenerating. So the flow is like you essentially have the spec. Whenever you find a bug, you throw the code, the whole thing, and you regenerate again and again as you iterate on the spec. It's interesting. I know it's also against some of the more incremental way of building, but I think it's an interesting line of thought and experimentation that is going on like that.
I have like a point here. Like I think the conversation might be like, if you think about the executor, like if you think about what you're saying about the level of the abstraction, to some extent it's like is what executes like some logic or something, no? Like, but I think like what AI is enabling is not that. Like my take is like you always will want some deterministic part, because like what AI enables is essentially how you non-deterministically connect those deterministic parts. Like I think like that for me is the point. Like okay, so you have all these like little blocks that and then like how do you plug them? You have like ton of different ways, and before you had to have like 100 switches or ifs or whatever you like to use, and that's how you connect. No, like right now AI what enables is how do you connect that in a way that was not meant to be before. No, and like I think like maybe the comparison with like a higher level of abstraction is not the same kind of like, I don't know how to say it, but like it's not the same type of category if you like maths, no? Like it's not that same thing. Like it's in another league. Like that's at least my point of view on that.
So regarding this, software is quite interesting because essentially you can rewrite a program, like add incremental changes to code, and we have ways to validate that code. So we have tests, we have compilers, we have lots of stuff to make sure that this code works more or less as we want. The thing is, you all mentioned some applications to natural language, but there are applications as voice or images, and the LLMs are random. So my question is, once you have a random output, how you validate the language is correct? Like the phrase that the LLM gives to HR is the correct one? Has there been a bug? And this comes also to the conversation with open source. Because when Claude gives you an answer to whatever, it's a black box, yeah, you can debug it. But if you have quality, how you debug an LLM of trillion parameters? Like, if you know there's a bug, how you find that bug? Like, we don't have that tooling. So the question is, do you think there will be increasing developments in that regard? And there will be like an entire field similar to what we have in software to understand and to try to have testing or harnessing on that regard, or debugging tools even. Because I imagine a sound or an image, like if an image have one pixel off, you don't know. Knowing that image is correct or not correct is not trivial at all. So what's your view on that?
So well, for in our case, we do evals, and I think it's also very, very interesting. No, when you use an LLM to check the output of a different LLM, and chasing the output. No, well, that's the tooling we have now to do so. But of course, you are using another LLM again. So still, it's also the way we are currently monitoring our agents at scale, no, and the outputs that we generate. Like for example, in our case, we evaluate candidates against job criteria. So it's very important that you don't do any discrimination, any systemic bias, etc. No, and you also detect whenever there's an hallucination or whatever. So that's the way we're using now. But at the same time, you might not be 100% sure.
And also, we are always thinking in how to automate that. But all QA, like I'm being bullish and saying from the very beginning, like the QA skills is going up. In my opinion, everybody that is developing needs to have like a strong skill set around how to do QA, exploratory testing, all the techniques, all school techniques, because the reality is like the LLMs like move us into an sloppy area where we stop thinking critically on what are we building, and we just fly with it, and we end up in something that we never asked, like it's random. So I think the really craft of this is essentially developing the sense and on when the LLM is pushing you and like removing your thought and your criteria, and realizing that and stopping doing that, and then validating. Obviously, we have like the evals and all the automatic testing techniques that probably are going to be evolving, and they are going to be better. And I think the models are much better, and they are in a path that they are going to be really, really good soon. I mean, they have been increasing in quality really, really rapidly. But I think we need to test what we are doing and shipping. There is no way around that, and probably some of that needs to be manual for a time, and we will need to continue to do that for a long time.
Just to give my opinion here, you mentioned I think two different things. One is about when you're doing software that what right means is really clear, and then you could use everything we have been using so far, deterministic test and testing that the functionality you're shipping does what it does. And then when an LLM replies to a user, it goes outside. And then the question is what is right? So what you are testing against. When Google was doing his algorithm a while ago and was giving results to users, what was right? They were testing with humans and they were looking how the user behaved to a given result for a query. And the code was generated by humans, but still the output was being tested on the wild. So there the concept of right is way different, and then you can only get a human input on the other side. Even Cloud Code does every while and then they say, how good is this session? 1, 2, 3, 4. Say, okay, and that's gonna be into the input of how good they're doing because they still have to use the human to know how they think it is. And probably for the same session, same prompt, same output, you will say it's a 1, I will say it's a 3, because there is no right in that part of the world.
There's a very interesting point here, and for example, in our case, we rank the candidates against job requirements, etc., no? And we give them a rank based on how much they match those requirements. And we're thinking like, shall we let HR to change that scoring, no, and adjust and provide their own decisions, no? But at the same time, we're thinking like, well, now we could get that bias from someone back into the system, no? And as you said, like now what is right becomes a bit more blurry, and you have to be careful because you might end up producing that bias that you are trying to avoid in some ways, no? So really interesting topic as well.
And do you think we? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, like just a last note on this is that there's a whole new area that we still don't know what's the name of that or how it will look like. This morning with Ezequiel we were talking in the train, like how do you test something that evolves? Like how do you test something that has like the time component into it baked in a way that you need to kind of like let it live for a while to actually test? And how do you, like this is something that it's unclear, no? And it goes really aligned with the direction of like the human saying, okay, this it's too chaotic, no? Like you don't really know like if a small change in a step actually how is the impact, and maybe you don't care or you do. It's unclear.
Maybe,
see, like,
Taras, maybe you can explain a little more the example because I think we have it very clearly. Basically, our agent swarm, yes, agent.swarm.dev is there. Check it out. Has Bayesian memory. We added a couple of weeks ago together with the memories that we have there, right? So it learns every time we do something, it learns and it uses those memories and scores those memories. And we were thinking, how do you test this? Do I need to run it there with all my memories, with all my interactions, replay it, right? Like as we used to do with APIs for hours, and then see if the results are better, but what are really the results? Because I reviewed the PR and I said, this line is okay and this line is not, but how do I do an eval on that, right? So that's the challenge, right? I think when you explain it like that, it's like blow-minding. It's like, okay, now I need to record everything that I did, and we use multiple surfaces, so we use like Linear, Slack, email, send all these to the cloud, run the swarm for hours, and then compare to something that we had before that we don't even know how to score how good it was, right? So I think what keeps me sane after my nightmare is the following. What somewhat aligned to what Miguel said. We trust humans a lot, right? Humans are not great. Is it better than my human bar that, I don't know, I have a kid, I don't sleep some nights? I'm pretty sure LLM is going to be better, right? So that's the bar, really, at least right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we were joking, like, should we do like performance reviews, like, you know, of the agents, you know, like do like a formal performance review and ask some questions, and then based on that, like try to kind of like, it's more of a joke, but like maybe not.
Yeah, I see several. Let's take this one. Yeah, let me put this one away.
Well, I had just a practical question, and what is your personal setup now coding, and how has it changed? Like, do you have 8 sessions in parallel with 4 cloud codes or whatever? And And how do you handle this context switch? Because for me, it's really hard. For example, if I code something and it's like 8 minutes, I don't normally wait 8 minutes. It was like before when it compiled. I just go to another thing, and then I have to go back, and then go back to the other place. So how do you handle that context switch all the time? Well, those two questions, basically.
I'm been gravitating towards different things. So at some point I was running 5 agents or so with different tracks, two the backend and a mobile app, and I was having one bug fix or a small chore in one and a big feature, because I figured like my work was essentially putting things to work, planning work, reviewing, and that was really tiring. And I figured at some point like I was running faster for what I was trying to do, and I moved to a single thread. So essentially, I've been using RPI, like research, plan, and implement like set of prompts, where essentially I can be like researching something, I can be implementing always something, and I could be either researching or reviewing a plan and creating those. So in that way, I have always like something that is coming, and my focus is on that thing to validate and to make sure, and also on the side I'm researching and planning and preparing things. But it's a single execution or two at most, because I think what we are not used to is the mental way of changing that fast the context and delegating and moving on. So, but it's still something like we are learning. I feel like I don't have a good answer to that.
Well, my scenario is quite weird because I don't do coding. I don't used to do coding, but now I do a lot, because it's weird because I use that idle time you're waiting, because now between meeting and meeting and can prompt something, go away, and at the end of the day, I get work done. But especially how that has been introduced to engineers has shifted a lot as well. Because we started with an approach of doing a lot of parallelism. Okay, you're gonna wait for something, so do something else, where the context switching was a really key skill that wasn't appreciated before. Indeed, it was the opposite. Your focus is better over time. Then we see that it didn't pay that much back, because we were not used to that, and it's difficult to handle over time. What we have been doing is evolving our harness, our skills, and everything we use in the normal software lifecycle. So we also have a spec-driven design. So within the spec is a lot of interaction. So it's not that you do a prompt, it stays 7 minutes and comes back. It comes back with questions quite quickly. So while it's building the whole plan, it's starting to give you questions. Then when you're gonna develop it, it's gonna develop it by chunks. So even if you parallelize part of it, it's not that much time. You're idle in between, like to focus on something else. So it's about knowing when you are speaking of organization, is the organization, but knowing yourself as an individual. If you're able to multitask, because you're used to that, because you're jumping between PRs, specs in the old world, and now you can manage that easily, probably multitasking is easier. If you are not having a process that keeps you closing the loop, closing smaller gaps with the LLM, it's going to be probably your way. So probably it's not one solution fits all. It's about each of them and having all the options, depending on the task, going to be, in my opinion, the solution.
I would like to add to what you just said, is that there's this next step where you start pushing things outside of your laptop, right? And that's kind of like, how do you kind of like start really be able to, as a single person, parallelize a lot of things. And I think like following this pattern, this is what we do, and this is how we found that this works the best, essentially because like inside of all the non-determinism, you at least know that it will go in this direction, and then like aligning on the plan is important and all these things, no? But like one of the key parts, so that it all makes sense for me at least, is that you need a way for the agent to prove that what they did makes sense. And this is kind of like this proof of work kind of like idea that we tell a lot with Desplega, is that you need to give like, and this is part of the process that you need to follow to actually like be able to parallelize more and more, is like you need to find out what are the correct tools that you need to build for your agents to validate their work in an effective way, and also kind of like to give to you the output of what they did and what they tested. They essentially kind of like reducing the cognitive load that you have when you're reviewing, so that, okay, you already had a plan, so you know in which direction it goes, you already had like the proof of work, and it's essentially kind of like, okay, you tested this, so it really aligns with the plan, and then it's like the amount of work that you need to do to kind of like review is much less. And in the end of the day is what you've been doing with your peers, like you onboarded an intern and you say, okay, did you run the app locally and test this button? Well, no, okay, do that, right? Like saying that to the agent is an indicator of like, okay, I need to give the tool or update the skill or whatever to be able to do that automatically, and I should not spend a single minute before that's done. Like that's the point, like you need to invest on your potential wasted time to kind of like reduce that, like don't go waste time saying that's like the lean fail, like these are like literally so precious minutes that you wasted on that, and the agent can do that really easily. Just like ensure it does it before you even review, and that's.
I would add to what Tara said. No, I think the developers becoming more of a tech lead, basically telling agents what they need to do now and checking that the work is being done correctly. And I think domain knowledge becomes more and more relevant, no? Because we might be biased to provide very nice technical solutions, etc. But at the end of it, no, you really need to solve a business problem, so in some way. And I think this is very interesting because that's where we've seen like these challenges where some neurosurgeon built an app that won a hackathon, no? And he didn't know anything about coding, no? And of course, he won't be able to maybe ship that into production or evolve the data model, etc., because he has no idea about that. But he knows his problem, no? And he knows how to provide what he needs in order to provide value to him or his peers, no? So I think domain knowledge becomes more and more relevant to engineers, and I see engineers owning the product function more and more, and owning the domain or in the product function and really orchestrating agents, no?
I think, and that give a perfect segue for my question, because it was like, in a world where software gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, that's not longer the bottleneck. It's definition, it's understanding the problem, and I think that the winner is going to be distribution and go to market. So who is there on the right time? And what I have having lots of discussion, like I was having a discussion with a bank in South America last week, their team is super worried that their softwares are going so much faster than what the product team can define and can kind of actually decide to do. So from your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of this double rhythm where the bottleneck is transferring from software and building to actually deciding what's worth to build and how you're managing it? I think especially probably Miguel, like, coming from the bigger organization, I think that's a bigger kind of a overview, but also like Orbio being a startup, I think it's super interesting to know where you're seeing there.
Okay, I'm gonna start. Something I've been seeing lately, I go from before going your question. Every principle I've been building on is changing. So I have been giving a lot of talks about many things in my life, software of economy of software, and many things, and I can review those sessions and say, okay, that I said was true back then and doesn't apply anymore. And also is how the teams are structured, how the functions of every person in the organization is when we create some org charts, and doesn't apply anymore. So I see this as a pipe that, okay, you create an organization and it's working at a pace because everyone at the same organization is working at the same pace. So product, design, engineering, if you have QA or something like that, deploy, everything is on a same level of output. And then we took one part of it and we made it bigger. So we get in a funnel. So what happens when you have a funnel? You have one part that doesn't swallow as much. So either we can go in different directions or in all of them. Mostly what you will look at is, okay, let's do all the pipe as big as the biggest part of it. So you will look to product and say, okay, how you are giving in the scenario you have, that product gives everything for the engineers in like a structural way, how you are going faster at the same pace that we can. You will say, okay, have the bottleneck on the code reviews, etc. And then how you do that, and you try to optimize the whole funnel. That's a way. The other way is, okay, if my part goes bigger, have more bandwidth, because the time the engineer is spending on coding reduced dramatically, what is it doing with the rest of the time? Is doing more coding, so it's waiting for the previous line to give the work, or is moving there to say, okay, I'm gonna move a little bit and help out over there. So maybe the artifact that you were expecting on that line change. So the PRD maybe you're getting should not be that defined, because engineer could take it a step before, more abstract, and go into the details, or even go to the client, depending on the kind of engineer of the company that you have. So, or as I said, both. At Fear, we're doing both. So we had a mindset of the engineers are not engineers that get what needs to be done and they just execute. I think that anybody that has an engineer or is an engineer that only get requirements for a Jira ticket very well defined and translate them to code is doomed, so run away. So we had our mindset already, so we're doing that more of going into where the problem is and carrying it end to end. And also the product organization is using the tools, and we are more savvy to the question before, we're more advanced, we're helping them as much as we can to also produce better, because they have better to do research, to do PRDs, to validate things. And also we're giving them something that wasn't like forbidden before. They have access to the code, they can deploy ephemeral environments, and they can prototype. So the artifact are changing dramatically how that is being handed over. Yeah, that will be how we're doing, and it's mostly in all the direction, because the funnel needs to be straight, a pipe again.
But I mean, the engineers were supposed to understand what we are building for all the always. Like that's been like that. Like for some, there were some instances of people over specializing and not wanting to talk to customers. But in my experience, the best engineers like to go to talk to customers, understand the product perfectly, the domain and everything. So I don't think that's changing. The thing is, like with the trio, the typical trio, the product, design and engineering, my feeling is like we need to do product, they need to be building, we need to do design. So in a sense, like we are gonna be doing each other works, and in my opinion, we are gonna be consolidating. I don't see a world where somebody like you pay the tax on communication and hands-on and things like that. I expect people to be building solutions and to just be able to talk to a customer and things. So we will need to get some skills if we don't have it and the other way, but also we will need to design the system and maintain the system and the machine that build the software. But that's about it. I think the requirements are going to come and the conversation needs to evolve. It's going to be a dramatic change. Some people are not going to like the new job, in my opinion. It's going to be different.
Yeah, I convey with you that it's going to melt. Still, I think that the specialization of what each of them has, I don't expect, even if the product manager can prototype and can vibe code things, to know how the infrastructure is being running. So there is always room for that. Even if we can do designs, I don't expect my engineer to have a degree on how, have taste, because that I don't have taste. I cannot design well, even if I can add something that I think is pretty. And in the product side, I think that engineers could go to customers, and they go. I don't expect to go all the time and know all the customers in a category that you have enough sampling to know that it's a good solution. I expect to go to one or two. And I want to do this a little thing, because I think, as you do, and as I said before, that the engineer should be, the good one is the one that understands. Whoever here in the room, I have that nobody is, but somebody knows an engineer that say, okay, I want everything very well defined, and I will not breathe and die if I don't get everything from the Jira ticket perfectly and try to code. Raise your hand.
Do you know an engineer like that?
You know anybody like that?
I know a couple.
Yeah.
Do I count twice?
Because there are a lot, and I mean, many people are gonna be very good on this new era, and many people is gonna struggle, and many of them will have a very bad time. So no, you need to open your frontier, and because you have more time, go to speak with the customer. So I will not speak with anybody. I don't speak with my friends. I'm not going to speak with that random person. So
Okay, guys, we need to call it. I'm sorry, Antonio. I think this debate is actually very good. Is what AI native is for me, and this idea of the engineering team building the machine that builds the machine, and that's going to take us another hour probably. And there are pizzas over there.